So Cicero is doing very well for never having really commanded armies. Okay, he's made it all the way up to praetor, and he has never seriously commanded an army. He was a military tribune, but if we read Plutarch's life of Cicero, it sounds to me like Cicero was not, like, he didn't even want to hold a sword. He was not interested in fighting in the social war really much at all. So that leads us then to Cicero's next huge opportunity. And it involves a guy named Lucius Sergius Catilina, who we just call in English Catiline, and that's fine. You don't need to know his full Roman name. What I do want you to know about him, though, are a couple of things. First of all, he is a patrician. So he is not a plebeian, but he will act kind of like a popularis. He is a rabble-rouser, and he's degenerate. I mean, really. So his family is on the decline. He has not had anybody in the consulship in his family for over a century. His family is also losing wealth and may have even been close to kind of falling under the threshold of being senators. So he's patrician, but he's one of many of these, he's a member of one of these patrician families that is declining in wealth, right, and is being superseded by a lot of this new money that's coming in to the city of Rome. He was a Sullan. He had profited greatly, not as much as Crassus, but he had profited greatly during the proscriptions under Sulla, bought up property, obviously, on the cheap, as many people did. That's not exceptional. What is exceptional about him under the Sullan regime is that several of his relatives made their way onto the proscription list, and he himself turns in, and in some cases even murdered members of his own family, including his brother and a few of his in-laws as well. So this is obviously, these are crimes that he was allowed to commit without penalty because these were people that were officially on a kill list. In 73 BC, so this year that Verres goes off to Sicily, in 73 BC, he supposedly committed adultery. Well, he slept with a Vestal virgin. It's called adultery, right, because the Vestal virgins are, in effect, kind of the siblings of all Roman men, right, because of their duties to hold the sacred fire of Vesta. So this is obviously a huge crime. The Vestal would have been subject to being buried alive, and he would have been subject to execution. He is able to secure an acquittal because his friend is the judge in the case. So he is able to not get acquitted. He is able to not get prosecuted from that crime. Several of his allies, though, in 70 BC, find themselves removed from the Senate. He himself is not just kind of a bad dude, but he obviously hangs out with a lot of bad dudes. And when Pompey and Crassus revive the censorship, which we talked about last week, they purged like 64 or so members of the Senate, and several of those were allies of this guy, Catiline. So he is just a bad apple, right? That's certainly the view that we get from the sources, that he is not a very good guy. Nevertheless, in 68 BC, he will become praetor and go to what the Romans call the province of Africa, which is northern, just a small chunk of North Africa, which is where the city of Carthage had been. He was supposedly very abusive there. If we believe Cicero, I mean, he rivals Verres in the amount of extortion and corruption and bribery and theft and all of that he commits in the province of Africa. And in fact, it's so bad that the members of the Senate on the jury, because there's 1/3 of the jury is still senators, they vote to convict him of corruption in the corruption court. But the other 2/3 of the jury, who are newer men, not new men in the sense that they're senators, they're equestrians, they're merchants. They probably profited. Some of them profited with Catiline when he was governor. They vote to acquit, and that is what happens. So he ends up being acquitted when he is tried in 65 BC. But despite the fact that he was acquitted, because the case was ongoing at the end of that year, he could not run for consul, and he really wanted to run for consul in 65, so he misses out. That then gets us to 64 BC, and at this point he tries to run again. So Catiline runs a second time for consul. He also runs with two other people. One is Cicero, and another guy's name is Antoninus Hybrida. So those are the three main candidates for consul that year. Obviously, only two of them could be Cicero, Hybrida, and Catiline. And these two right here are basically allies. So they are interested in kind of running on a dual slate. Like they will work together to put in a bunch of popular legislation, a variety of legislation that's going to benefit the plebeians and the poor and so on and so forth. And so, the Senate are really only have one candidate, right? The Senate basically can back Cicero. And despite the fact that Cicero is a very pro-aristocrat person, he wants to be loved by the Senate, he wants to join them, they can spot a faker, right? They can spot somebody who doesn't really belong, right? And if you've ever been in that kind of situation, right, I'm sure you know what that's like, right? If you're with a group and you're kind of like, there's clearly some differences between me and them. And I'm sure that Cicero is aware of that. And obviously, but for the members of the Senate, conservatives in the Senate, they don't really have anybody else that's as prominent. Cicero's obviously rocketed in terms of his prominence in Rome, so he's going to get the vote. So they would rather support him. And of course, Hybrida and Catiline split the vote as well. So Cicero is able to get in. Now, one of the things that I had you read, which I hope that you read, it is, in my opinion, one of the most interesting sources that we read in this class, which you might have bypassed it because of the topic, but I hope you didn't. Well, I mean, there's a question about it, but it's Cicero's brother writing to him about how to run for consul. And it really gives some neat insight into what it meant to run for office. And we read in there that Cicero was encouraged to do a bunch of different things by his brother when he runs for the consulship. And a lot of it mirrors what you would see in a modern political campaign. It's fascinating how little things have changed. If you read the whole thing, right, Cicero's brother says, all men have a feeling that they would rather you told them a civil lie than give them a point-blank refusal. If you make a promise, the thing is still uncertain. It depends on a future day, and it concerns but a few people. But if you refuse, you alienate people to a certainty at once, right? If you tell people no, then they're immediately bothered and offended. But if you tell people yes, and you're talking about something that's going to happen in the future, and you don't deliver, well, who cares? You've already won. So it doesn't matter that you were dishonest. And number two, even if they're upset later, that was really just a few people that are upset, right? Whereas you win a bunch of people if you just tell them outright lies. Just promise them all sorts of crazy stuff, and then they will vote for you. And it's funny, because he even suggests that people want this. It's like people watching a play, like when they watch a political speech, and I think this is very insightful, right? It's like we know that they're lying to us, but we still want to believe them anyway, and we kind of have, it's like you see, like a lot of the Trump people are really hopeful right now, and like nothing that he said, I'm sure, is what's going to happen. And that would have been true of the other side too, right? I mean, again, I'm old enough to remember the optimism around the 2008 campaign of Barack Obama. We're all very excited about some things he was going to do. Didn't do them, closed Guantanamo Bay, a bunch of other things, right? Just, you make promises, you don't keep them. That is what politicians did in Cicero's day and in the present as well. And that was the advice, that, like naked advice, that he was given by his brother. So that gets us to Catiline's involvement in what appears to be a pretty troubling set of circumstances. So Cicero wins the consulship, and Catiline does not. So the Hybrida, right, is willing to work with Cicero on the basis that Cicero will not take a province and will cede the province that he was given by the Senate to Hybrida. And that province is Macedonia, which is a fairly lucrative province to get. So Cicero basically uses a political lever. He's like, okay, I've got Macedonia in my pocket. If you agree not to obstruct me, Hybrida, I will give you Macedonia and I will just not take a province. And that's what he does. So that kind of eliminates Hybrida from opposing Cicero in some various forms of legislation. He doesn't do much. There's not much that happens in most of Cicero's consulship. He stops like a land reform bill. There are a few other like small things that he does. There's really not much, and then this is all in 63 BC. There's really not much that happens in 64 BC. So or 63 BC. So we get to the end of that year, and Cicero is the leading consul, so he has to preside over the elections. Catiline runs a third time. Okay, so he's been barred the first time, he's lost the second time, and now he's going to run a third time. He's totally eligible to do that. He can run. But he runs on a platform that is so popularis that just nobody in the Senate backs him. Like, everybody is immediately against him. Like, he gets all this ire. He says that he is going to eliminate all debts, that he's going to redistribute a bunch of land that's owned by wealthy people. He bribes a bunch of people as well, like openly and nakedly. Like, Catiline just looks like a terrible candidate, and so he does not get in. So Catiline now is back in the Senate, having lost a third time, and he's very agitated. And then, after the elections, in between the time before the new consuls take over and Cicero gives up power, just a short amount of time, some letters are discovered. And these letters are wild. Like, they show that there is that somebody, we don't know who, had planned to kill a bunch of conservative senators. That some group was going to murder active Roman senators. And this obviously is terrifying to members of the Senate. There is a lot of concern that maybe some Italians are upset about all the things that have happened. Obviously, there's an ongoing concern about Italians being upset. Like, are the Italians behind this? There are Sullans that are mad that Sullan's legislation has been undone. They're agitating for more civil war. They want to return to the prescriptions so that there's some property for sale again that they can get on the cheap. There are some Sullans that maybe were involved in the conspiracy. Nobody knows who it is. And so the Senate go to Cicero, right, and they give him the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, right, the ultimate decree of the Senate. They say, look, do whatever it takes to find out who is trying to kill us. They're scared, right? And so Cicero takes this SCU, and he thinks that Catiline is behind this. He thinks that he doesn't have any proof, but he thinks that Catiline is actually involved. And he doesn't have any hard evidence, but what he decides to do is to claim that he has some. He claims that he knows that Catiline is involved. And he lets this be known all across the city. And the hope is that even though he doesn't have proof, that he can get Catiline to run away. If you can get Catiline to flee the city of Rome, that will look guilty, right? That's what that will look like. And he can then say, look, I have the proof that Catiline's involved because he ran away, right? So he doesn't actually have evidence, but if he can make Catiline look guilty, then he can go after him. So he goes to the Senate after letting this spread throughout the city that he thinks Catiline's guilty. And he goes to the Senate assuming that Catiline has left the city. Catiline is in the Senate meeting. So that has blown up. Cicero now has a planned speech to the Senate where he was going to say, hey, look, Catiline's left. Let's all vote that he's an enemy of the state and go after him. So he has this really hard task in front of him where he has to persuade Catiline to his face that he's going to get him, that the Senate are about to prosecute him and try him, so he better flee the city. And also, right, has got to persuade the Senate at the same time that they don't like Catiline, that Cicero really does have evidence against him, and that they really should prosecute Catiline. So he's got to manufacture two things at once. And you can see this. We have the first speech, Cicero against Catiline, speech number 1, where if you read it, it's really interesting, right? It reads, he's simultaneously speaking to Catiline and speaking to the Senate. So to Catiline, right, and he's saying this to his face. This is, the drama here would have been impressive. Catiline, do you hesitate? If you cannot remain here with peace, to depart to some distant, land, and to trust your life, saved from just and deserved punishment. Right, I'm coming for you. Punishment, justice is coming. So you had better leave to flight and solitude. Make a motion, say you, to the Senate. And if this body votes that you ought to go, right? So what he's saying is, Catiline, you want a formal vote. You want me to put it to vote, to whether we should exile you. But obviously Cicero can't do that because he doesn't have evidence. So he has to delay, right? So he has to convince Catiline that he can call this vote. I will not make such a motion, though, because I want you to see what these men think of you. So I'm not going to call a formal vote, but I want you to endure me blasting you in front of these senators, right? Look around. See, they all hate you. Well, again, very, very clever, right? Be gone from the city. Deliver the republic from fear. Depart into banishment, if that is the word you are waiting for. This is what Verres did, right? Verres left voluntarily before he could be prosecuted. Cicero's relying on that reputation. He's saying, look, I've won these kind of cases before. I can win against you. Do you really need me to call the question formally, or will you just leave? Right? Meanwhile, to the Senate, he's saying kind of another thing to them. Conscript fathers, let the worthless be gone. Let them separate themselves from the good. Let them collect in one place. So this is referring to Catiline and anybody that's acting with him. I promise you this, O conscript fathers, that's the Senate, that there shall be so much diligence in us, the consuls, much authority in you, so much virtue in the Roman knights or the equestrians, so much unanimity, right? We're all together, right? Senators, we're all together, right? This guy's a bad guy, right? Right? That's what he's doing. That you shall see everything made plain and manifest by the departure of Catiline. Everything checked and punished. Now, interestingly, if you read between the lines, what are they not going to get to see? What is not being made plain and manifest? The evidence. There's no evidence. He has no evidence. He just wants Catiline to leave, but he's telling the Senate, look, if he leaves, that tells you that he's guilty. Cicero is successful in this speech. It's one of the greatest accomplishments in oratory in all of history. He is able to, with a speech, convince Catiline to leave and therefore secure a Senate vote that Catiline is an enemy of the state. And sure enough, Catiline goes into Etruria and he gathers a bunch of people with him. Well, I'll ask you who those people are in a second. And he gathers an army. So he may have been involved in a conspiracy, but Cicero, if he wasn't, Cicero just pushed him into one, right? And so there are historians that debate this question. Like, was Catiline always involved in a conspiracy and Cicero just found him out? Or was there maybe a conspiracy and Cicero convinced Catiline to join it and therefore was able to kind of rise up as like the big prosecutor, right? This sort of now elevates Cicero's career even more. We don't really know. We do know that Cicero is able to get these threats to materialize basically out of nothing. He does not have actual evidence, and he is able to get something out of it. So, if you read the sources from Lewis and Reinhold about kind of the state of things in 63 BC, you would know who joined the conspiracy. So senators who are in debt, obviously, would have joined Catiline. And just anybody who would have profited from a civil war. Those people are there too. Sallust also adds just kind of some groups that are like tropes of elites. So like the lazy people, the criminals, right? I mean, I guess so, right? Probably. But, you know, Sallust is also just kind of saying bad people. These are bad people. What Cicero does is he gives a second speech now in the Senate. So he's secured Catiline's Catiline leaving the city. He now wants to find out who's with him. So he gives a second speech in the Senate as a way to intimidate any senators and anybody around that's also with Catiline to flee. Then he gets a second big break. There are a group of Gallic peoples called the Allobrages who are just a tribe of Celtic Gallic peoples who are up in the north of Italy. They come to Cicero, representatives come to Cicero and say, just so you know, we were approached by some of your ex-senators and this guy Catiline. Like, they actually came to us and asked us to fight with them in a civil war against Rome. And we have letters. We have signed documents showing that they did this. This gives Cicero the hard evidence he has finally wanted. He is able to get names of 5 senators, and including an active praetor, somebody who's currently serving as one of the praetors. So some high-profile people. So he gets 6 people arrested. So he arrests these people that are named in the letters. Now, this is where Cicero goes off the rails a little bit, and he gets into some trouble for this. Cicero says, look, I have an SCU. I have advice of the Senate. I still have that. Yes, it was to find out who the conspirators were, but I found them. I still have this power. I want these guys executed. I don't want a trial. That's kind of weird. Like, I've always thought that was weird. And I'm not full-on conspiracy theorist here that would say that Cicero made this thing up. I wouldn't probably go that far, but it is weird that he didn't want these people to appear in court, right? He pushes to he holds a Senate vote and makes the senators all go on the record to say whether they want these guys just executed without a trial. Caesar, Gaius Julius Caesar, says no. But the conservative senators say yes, including Cato. Cato, the younger, is a very conservative senator. This is the guy that blocked, I mentioned him at the end of Wednesday, this is the guy that blocked Pompey's land veterans. Like, this is the guy that supposedly stands on principle, and he is all for executing these senators without a trial. Like, again, this is a real big breach of Roman norms. Cicero gets the vote, and the prisoners are all strangled to death before being tried, before they can give testimony and talk about it. Which, again, that's just weird to me. Some senators, enough senators, also use this opportunity to name Cicero Father of the Country, which is a very rare title, an almost unprecedented title. There have only been a few people in Roman history that get this title, Pater Patriae, Father of the Fatherland. Very, very rare title. Obviously, not everybody likes Cicero, and there are some people who were deeply offended by this, and we will see those people crop up later. But Cicero, obviously now without fighting a war, without even taking a province, has become father of the country. Again, really impressive guy. You have to admire the guy. He's difficult to read sometimes, but and he's like, we have his personal, and Gwyn talks about this, like, we have his personal letters, so like, we know how imperfect of a guy he was. He was kind of petty, he was very insecure, he was a braggart, but you can't deny the guy's accomplishments. He's very, very, very impressive. So this is a man who had no ancestors, who had held public office in Rome. He held every office in the first year he was eligible, which is a feat in and of itself, let alone for a new man. He never joined the popularis, so he was not a demagogue. He does all of this by allying with senators who know that he's a new man and don't always appreciate him. And he is able to win glory in this way.
Thank you so much for checking out this video. I encourage you, if you'd like to get more free Roman history content, check out my podcast, the Pax Romana Podcast, P-A-X Romana Podcast. It is available anywhere you can find podcasts, so Spotify, Apple Music, all of those places. And if you would, please take a moment to like this video and leave a comment. You can also subscribe to the channel, and all of those things will help boost the channel in the YouTube algorithm. Finally, if you're interested in following me on X, you can do so by looking for me at Prof CPE, P-R-O-F CPE. Thanks so much for watching the video. We'll catch you next time.